Hey everyone, and welcome back to Scotty's Garage. You asked for it, so here it is. This is the story on how I got here. Hey guys, and welcome back. I will start this episode by apologising that the sound is not going to be as good as the previous two videos. And the reason for that is my lapel mic just died, just died. I guess I shouldn't be too angry. I've had the things 20 bloody years. So, a little bit frustrating. It just means that I'm going to have to try and make this sound less echoey in the editing. It may work, it may not. We'll see how we go. But I will have to buy some new lapel mics to amplify our videos. So anyway, the story. This is the thing I asked in the first episode. Do you guys want to hear the story of how I got here? And this isn't going to be my full life story. I mean, we could break it up if you guys really wanted to hear some stuff, because I have lived an interesting, weird life. Certainly my upbringing was not standard. However, let's just stick to the media career side of things for the moment. And if you just want to hear like the scars of Scotty's life, because I've had a lot of cars. We could run through some of them. We could talk about history if I want to, if you really want to, but you've got to let me know, because it's kind of weird talking about this stuff. But anyway, the media career though is quite interesting, and how I got to where I am today. I've been in the media industry here, like the automotive media industry here in Australia, for over 20 years. And it was an interesting start. Like if I'd known this was a career path I could have chosen, I would have directed myself in this direction a lot earlier. But who knew? Who knew this was an option? I certainly didn't. Certainly at school, I used to read Street Machine all the time, and I just didn't think this was even an option for me. So I guess I'll start with, the internet is where all this kind of kicked off. If I break it down into two words, I'll say the internet and karate, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with the internet. So let's say mid-90s, the internet in Australia is really starting to pick up. People getting excited about the internet. It's this big information database. Everything was the internet. If you were on the internet, you were somebody, I guess. It was an interesting time, and back then computers were super expensive. I think my first personal computer, I got a loan for $3,000 to get a computer so I could get on the internet. Seems crazy. But I was also a Mopar guy, so heavily into Valiants. They were cheap performance cars, and I was heavily into that and drag racing and that sort of thing. But there was very little information on the internet about drag racing and Chryslers, so I read everything I could, all the magazines, all the books, stuff out of the States as much as I could. It was always hard to get information though, so I thought maybe I should do my own website. I created a website called Mopower Australia, and this is going back quite a way, and I had a charger at the time with a supercharged small block in it, and there just really wasn't any information. You had to go and find someone who had the information and try and get it off them, and everyone was very tight-lipped. They all wanted their own advantage, but yeah, it was an interesting time. So I learnt HTML. I sort of, through the internet, I went in there and how do I design my own website? Learnt HTML basically to create my own website, and there was no digital cameras and stuff back then. The very few digital cameras were super expensive, and I did buy some of those way back, but it was all pretty much scanning photographs and trying to get them on the internet and that sort of thing, and it took ages to download a photo. You're on dial-up, so you're dialing into an exchange, and the photo would come down the screen like this. So, you tried to make your photos as small as possible. It was an interesting time, I've got to say. But through that, I had my own website. I'm doing, updates when I can. And I'm talking to other Chrysler enthusiasts on forums and stuff like that. Well, I don't even think forums kind of exist. It was more like message boards, you know. So there'd be Chrysler message boards and you'd talk about stuff. And I met people through there, like Gus, you know, I met through the message boards and stuff like that. And some other guys that I met through the message boards. And some of us were kind of disappointed in the lack of Chrysler content in Australian media, like certainly the publishing side of things. You know, we thought Street Machine had kind of let the team down a little bit. There wasn't much Chrysler stuff out there, and we thought, why don't we create our own Chrysler magazine? So, you know, it's easy to talk about, but hard to do. And so a couple of us got together. There was a guy that was involved in, you know, actual printing. He'd done his apprenticeship, I think, through printing, and he had people in contacts in that industry. And he was pretty widely known throughout the industry, certainly the Chrysler side of things. And then I was we're talking I'm late 20s at this point, and I was very keen to get involved. And so I went and bought some gear. You know, I bought a Nikon camera, like film camera. We're talking film, right? So not not digital. This is all film. Film Nikon, and read up what I could about taking photos and that sort of thing. And I'd been reading car magazines all my life, so I kind of had an idea of what a good photo should look like. And so we got together, and the printing guy, his name was Phil Bryant. And Phil, his stepdaughter was a designer, so we had an in there as well, so she would design. And we decided to get together and we created this, Sixpacks magazine. That's right, we created this. And so we were partners, me and Phil, in this endeavour. We decided not to put a charger on the cover of the first cover, because every other Chrysler magazine had always put a charger on the cover. And I kind of regret that now. We probably should have done it because it's just smart, putting a charger on the cover. We went with a Centura. It was a well-known Centura at the time. This car won Horsepower Heroes in the 6-cylinder class at Summernats. It was Greg Banks's car, and eventually I bought this car off Greg, but I didn't own it at this time. I just really liked the car. So we featured both Greg and Tom. And Tom you would have seen in some Carnage stuff, like with Dad's Ute. We raced against Tom and his son there. But yeah, it was interesting to create our own magazine, you know. But it was also, alright, partnerships are hard. All right, everyone has their own idea of how to progress, and me and Phil kind of butted heads on a few things. I did pretty much everything in this magazine in terms of every feature. I shot it, every word, I wrote it basically. But Phil didn't want to put bylines on anything. He didn't want to say, you know, this story was by Scott Taylor and this story was by this Scott Taylor and blah blah blah, because people would realise very quickly that Scott was doing the whole magazine. So anyway, we did a couple of these. I was around for the first two of them. So we did this one, and there was the next one which did have a charger on the cover, a police charger. So yeah, after that I signed it all over to Phil and let him run with it, and now we'll get back to the other side of it. So I did 2 issues of Sixpacks, basically shot and wrote the whole magazines. I even have 15 brand new copies of Sixpacks in a box right over there. I have 15, and they're non-barcoded copies. So we did 1,000 without barcodes. Everything else had barcodes, so it went to news agents and that sort of thing. But 1,000 of them did not have barcodes. I think it was kind of a screw up at the time, but 1,000 ended up with no barcodes, and we took them to car shows and sold quite a those. But I have 15 pristine non-barcoded copies in a box. If you would like to buy one of those, I can do a signed copy for you. There will only be 15 of them. 15 signed copies. So I guess I'll work out how we go about selling those. But yeah, if you're interested in one, I will sell them, because I've been hanging on to these things for 20 years and I don't know why. So anyway, we did 2 issues. Well, Slick Sixpacks went for more than 2 issues, but I was involved for the first 2. So let's roll back to the karate side of things. So predating the internet, I used to do karate. I know, weird, huh? That's where I met my wife, funny enough. And I also met a guy by the name of Jason Gray. Now there's a name that some of you might find familiar, especially in the Australian scene here. As they say, sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. In my case, I think it was kind of both, and I think you make your own opportunities. So I met Jason doing karate. Jason was a 2nd degree black belt. I think he even got his 3rd degree at some stage. But yeah, I was this young guy into cars. He was into cars. He actually had a car yard at the time. And then he bought the car that he would become famous for, Blown, which was a VS GTS. So 5.7 litre stroker VS GTS. He put the number plates Blown on it because he put a STA supercharger on it, and then went out and broke horsepower records at all the major shows. So he took me for a ride in the car straight after he bought it. He bought it, and he put the blower on it, and he goes, "Scott, come for a ride in this thing. It's amazing, you know." And so we're screaming down Picnic Point Road, because the karate dojo was in Panania, so it's the Japanese Academy of Martial Arts it was, on Picnic Point. No, it was not on Picnic Point Road. But anyway, we were screaming down Picnic Point Road in Jason's GTS late at night, 180, 200 k's an hour. And that thing, it was fast, but it was kind of I'd never been in a centrifugally supercharged car. I had no idea what they felt like. It didn't feel like blown cars as I knew them, because, you know, like a Roots blown car, you step on the throttle and it's all there straight away. The centrifugal supercharged car, it comes in, it's like it's, you know, 3,000 RPM, it might be 4 pounds of boost, but at 6,000 RPM, it'll be 15 pounds of boost, and it just sucks you along. And man, it was a reasonably quick car, but it made a lot of horsepower. All right, so he went to Summernats that year, and I've got video of this. He made, I think it was 406 that first year, and he won the Horsepower Heroes with 406. I know it sounds ludicrous now, considering you see the cars we have on Carnage. But 406 horsepower, no one could match that, you know. And then the next year you come back and it was 450 something, you know. So he's the first guy to win back-to-back, and he held that back-to-back record for a lot of years. And then, you know, he got, his mates were like guys like Todd Wilkes and Rob Godfrey and all, and they were heavily involved in that whole Horsepower Heroes scene. So I met Jason through karate. Funny enough, he even broke my jaw once, spinning back kick to the face while we were sparring. I held no animosity to that. I stepped into it and didn't have my guard up, and boom. Yeah, but it's just things that happen, you know. It's just, and we remained mates for a long time. And so I was talking to him about Slick Sixpacks and all that sort of stuff, and I'd even applied for Zoom magazine, and Jason, as part of his fame of doing that car, became the, let's call it the editor of at large for Street Commodores magazine. So Street Commodores and Zoom magazine and Hot Fours all belong to a company called Express Publications. Totally different to ACP, who owned Street Machine. So everyone thought Street Commodores was part of Street Machine. No, never a part of it. Totally different companies to work for, and different organisations totally. And yeah, in many ways they were very different. So Jason was kind of the figurehead of the magazine at this point, but the day-to-day stuff was done by a guy called Glenn Torrance, who you may know from Unique Cars and Street Machine. He's been a freelancer for many, many years, and he's even done his own TV series. So great guy, Glenn and I are mates. But Glenn, at this point, he was kind of the working editor of Street Commodores, and he parted ways with Express Publications, And then the bosses at Express Publications called Jason and said, we need you to run this right now because Glenn's gone, you're the man, if you want it, you can do this and you can be the man. And so Jason's gone, well, shit, all right, I got to do this. Who do I know that knows cars, who's interested in doing this? And he called me up and said, Scotty, I know you're interested in doing publishing stuff. You've already done your Valiant magazine and all this sort of stuff. Are you interested in coming in and working for Street Commodores? So you got to remember, at this time, I was in telecommunications, worked for a French company called Alcatel. I'd worked for Telstra for years, but at this point I was at Alcatel and making quite a bit of money, had a company car, fuel card, making good bucks, but I hated my job, and I desperately wanted to get involved in publishing. So I said, if they can come up with the money, because I'd already applied to Zoom magazine at this point, and Zoom couldn't give me what I wanted, and they went with a younger guy, Grant. I forget his last name, and I do apologise, but Grant was the guy they hired. And then, like I said, it was only a month or two later, they gave me this call and said, you know, do you want to come in and interview for a Street Commodore's job? And it wasn't much of an interview. I got to meet the managing director at the time, Simon Mullins. He was Jason's boss, the publisher of the company, you know, because they had the owner, Charles Vella, publisher was Simon Mullins, and then Jason was the editor, of Street Commodores. And Simon, I met with him and I showed him Slick Sixpacks and I showed him some of the other stuff I've done on the internet and that sort of thing. And he, you know, the magazine he was kind of like, okay, yeah, it's a little bit amateurish, but you seem to have a grasp of this whole thing. So, yeah, we'll give you the money you want. And it was laughable. It was like, I think 45 grand a year. It was not a lot of money. It was a massive, massive pay cut from where I was. But I had my foot in the door. So anyway, I worked for Street Commodores for 3 years, and I signed Slick Sixpacks over to Phil and let him do whatever he wanted with it. We parted on pretty good terms at that stage, but I think I wouldn't consider ourselves friends right now because I haven't talked to Phil in years, but we've had some stoushes on the internet and just, yeah. So we've gone our own way. Phil did what he wanted with Slick Sixpacks. It was, you know, it's what he wanted anyway. He wanted to control it and do everything. So I let him go with that. I think he had some animosity towards me later because I'd left to go and do Street Commodores, and so he had to actually do everything then, or find people that could do it. So, and I think he felt a little bit betrayed. Wasn't my intention, but you know, I had to do what was right for me, you know, so it's not like I sold it to him for mega dollars. I literally signed it over to him for free. So, anyway, Street Commodores. So I was at Street Commodores and Express Publications for 3 years. When we started there, one of the first questions Jason said, or one of the first things Jason said was like, dude, have you ever owned a Commodore? And I'm like, no. He's like, we need to get you into a Commodore. You can't be driving around in Valiants if you work for a Commodore magazine. I'm like, cool, all right. He said, what would you want to do if you're going to do a build-up car? What would you want to do? And I said, well, let's do a V6 Commodore. And he said, why the fuck would we do a V6 Commodore? I said, what is the number one question we get in the magazine every month? How do you make my V6 Commodore go faster? And he said, you're right. Yeah, no one does it. And I'm like, everyone wants it, but no one does it. So let's do it. So we started a car called V6 Vengeance, a project car. I paid way too much for it. I paid $800 for this VM that Jason found for me. It looked like someone had given birth in the front seat. It was disgusting. It was terrible. It ran on like 2 or 3 cylinders, you know, but this was 2002, so you still had to pay a little bit of money for something like that. And so yeah, we started off V6 Vengeance, and it ended up being, even Jason said years later, after we'd both left Express and I'd been, you know, living down at Holbrook for years, Jason, you know, me and him used to talk quite often on the phone, and even years later he said that was the best project car I think anyone has ever done in a car magazine in Australia, like full stop. He said it was just great. Like what we did with that car is just fantastic. And we did. We took a V6 Commodore and when we started, no one had run an 11-second pass in Australia with a V6 Commodore. By the time we finished, we'd run 11.9 and we were the 5th to do so. There had been a whole upswelling in the whole V6 performance scene with Commodores in Australia. And I guess I'm to blame for that. But yeah, there was a whole bunch of guys that thought, oh, we're going to take street Commodores and V6 vengeance on. But we're all mates. We used to all talk. All of us 5 guys that ran 11s, at that point, we're all friends and we would all talk about how we made our cars go faster. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. During that period of time as well, I got to learn about videoing cars. I was already interested, but I'd done some handycam stuff at high 8, but it was always hard to edit high 8 footage because it was analog. But I got to learn about digital video or mini DV tapes and stuff like that. So Express had this old PD100 consumer, sort of prosumer camera, and working with Ben Ellis, who was editor of Zoom magazine, I got to learn about, shooting cars and editing the footage and making videos out of it. And I ended up making the 2 Street Commodores DVDs, all right? So I filmed and edited both of these, all right? I think they sold 10,000 of each. 10,000 of each at $30 a pop. You do the math. Yeah. So I was doing that. I was doing, Street Commodores. If you're unfamiliar, if you're from overseas and you're unfamiliar, that's the Street Commodores magazine. It's even got some V6 Vengeance in it. There you go. No, that's something else. What's that? Sorry, don't want to get sidetracked. I'm getting sidetracked. So Street Commodores, it was all about Commodores. And Holden's, and the Holden Commodore was Australia's most popular car, and in some ways still is. You go to some, and that's half the field is Commodores. People hate that, but by the same token, if most of the cars are sold are Commodores, you're going to end up with a lot of Commodores. So it's just a fact of life. So anyway, in amongst all that, I also got tipped to be editor of this magazine, Aussie Brutes. So it's a ute magazine created by Express Publication, and so I was editor of that, deputy editor of that, shooting all the DVDs, doing all this stuff, and while I had a small pay rise, I wanted something a bit more. I think, for what I was doing, and I'd been there a few years, I thought, I think I'm worth a little bit more money. And they said, no, just flat out, no. And I just went, okay. And I didn't quit straight away or anything like that, I'm not smarter than that. So I just started laying my plans. From that moment though, I started laying my plans. And you got to remember, Express Publications was a very volatile place to work. It was a revolving door. Like, out of all the people that worked there over the years, I think Simon Telford, which is where I met Simon, and myself were 2 of the only people to walk out under our own steam, okay? Everyone else got sacked at some point. So, and like I said, sometimes it's what you know and who you know. So I met Simon there. Simon used to be the deputy editor of Zoom magazine. Zoom was a magazine that was devoted to crazy conversions, like when you put an SR20 into a Datsun 1600 and stuff like that, or just mainly it was JDM motors getting put into cars that were not JDM cars, although they had a fair few JDM things as well, but the JDM magazine was more your high performance imports, and that was run by Ben Ellis. So Simon was deputy editor of Zoom magazine. He left probably 6 months, I think, maybe after I joined Street Commodores. Simon left and he went to work for Street Machine under Jeff Seddon. So that's where that link up comes from. So anyway, I'd asked for a pay rise, didn't get it, and I just went, you know what? I'm getting sick of driving every day through Sydney traffic 90 minutes, and this is a minimum, 90 minutes to work, 90 minutes home. So I'm in the car for 3 hours a day to sit at a computer and write stories and put up with the bullshit of Express Publications, who, like I said, wasn't a fantastic company to work for because the owner would come in and just sack 20, 30 people in a day. For, like, if they were having a bad week financially, they would just unload a whole bunch of people and then just, you know, gradually hire people back when they realised that they didn't have enough people to do the jobs. But they sacked. They had several of these big, large culls through the company. And, man, how do you work under those conditions? I mean, knowing that one day someone's going to tap you on the shoulder, regardless of whether you could do your work or not, someone was going to get tapped on the shoulder and go, yeah, sorry, dude, you don't have a job here anymore, you know. And they had these two big Tongans that worked in the warehouse, and we used to nickname them Bebop and Rocksteady. And they would escort people from the building. They were literally just, yep, bro, come with us. And they'd walk them out the door, you know. So that was what that place was like to work for. So I just went, you know what? I'm not digging this. So I went and bought myself that. That is a PD 170. Bought a tripod, I bought those lapel mics, and I was going to go off and make car DVDs. That's right. I was going to go make car DVDs. And it's kind of hilarious to think about now, because this is all so interlinked and it's all got me to this point. But yeah, I bought this camera, was going to go make car DVDs. I was already shooting stuff for street Commodores, and even when I was at some of these shows, I would take footage of non-Commodores, and Jason would be like, don't shoot that, it's not a Commodore. I'm like, that's fine. I'll replace the tapes. I'm just going to get the footage of this car, and I'll buy some tapes just to pay for the fact that I'm using company tapes to shoot this thing. But I'll replace the tapes. But yeah, I just want to get footage of this car doing this burnout. And I'll just stockpile this footage slowly. And so I went, and I'm going to go make car DVDs. I put in my notice after about 6 months. And I said to my wife, you know, let's move out of Sydney. I'm sick of Sydney. Like, I've been here 15 years. She was Sydney born and bred, but I'd only been there 15 years. And I was kind of like, you know, I am done with Sydney. Let's just move. And we used to go down to a Chrysler show every year down south. So we moved to Holbrook, basically. And I thought, well, we're going to move to Holbrook, and I'm going to live there, and I'm going to make car DVDs, and we're going to make lots of money, because car DVDs sell for good money and they don't cost a lot to make if you do it right. So the day I leave, I get a call from Simon Telford, and Simon goes, what are you doing Monday? I go, well, dude, I was actually going to have the day off before I start my new media career, but what do you got? And he's got, well, we've got this brand new HSV Senator. It's the new 6-litre VZ. These things are brand new. Can you go out and do a road test for us and write it up for the mag, for Street Machine, and then send it in? We need it pretty quick. And I'm like, cool. And through my street Commodores days, I'd driven a lot of the new Holdens, a lot of the new HSVs, also a lot of Utes for Aussie Brutes magazine. I'd done a lot of, you know, test reviews and stuff like that. So I was familiar with the concept. So I went out with a young photographer, and we shot this VZ Senator. And man, that was actually an interesting day, because we were out in the back blocks of, kind of out the back of, well, Goulburn, and just hammering this thing. And, you know, the photographer would just go, I need you to come around this corner faster, because it doesn't look like it's actually going fast. I need you to go faster. And at one point, I'm coming through this corner at 180 k's an hour, got this thing cranked up, and just so, you know, he could get his action shot. But anyway, I wrote the story, I sent it in, I even called it supersize me, because, you know, it's like they'd already released the VZ Commodore. Well, this is a new VZ with a bigger motor. So I called the story Supersize Me because the movie had only just come out a month or two prior. Simon loved the title. Obviously they loved the story because I sent it in, and I did it real quick. Like, I think I wrote the story the next day and pumped it in. And Simon rings me and goes, "Mate, Sedo wants to meet you." And I'm like, okay, cool. I'd already met Sedo at Summernats and Denny Utemaster and a few places like that. And Jeff Seddon was a legend in the publishing scene. He'd been the editor of Street Machine for a few years now. And then he'd also been just the editor of so many magazines over the years. He was an icon in the publishing industry. He still is, you know, he's kind of semi-retired these days. But Sedo, top guy. And I go in and meet him, and when you met with Sedo, you met with him at the pub because he was a big fan of the pub lunch. So he was old school, you know. So we go and meet him at the pub, have pub lunch with him. He goes, "Scott, where do you see your career going?" And I'm like, "Well, we've just bought a whole house in Holbrook, and I'm moving. I'm leaving Sydney, and I'm going to go make car videos." And he goes, "Well, do you see yourself as a magazine editor?" And I'm like, "Well, sure, yeah. I've done that stuff. I mean, I was always deputy editor, but anyone who's been in the industry will know that a deputy editor does basically a lot of the work, and the editor goes out and finds stuff, and they bring it all together. They control all the puppets, basically, but the actual deputy editor does the groundwork and making sure the magazine fills out." So, Sedo goes, "Well, we've got a job for you. It's kind of a freelance gig. Do you think you could be the editor of Street Machine Ford's magazine?" I'm like, "Okay, sure, I can do that. Can I do it remotely?" And he said, "Yeah, well, we do have that ability because the guy that does the Street Machine Commodore's magazine, because Street Machine had its own Commodore magazine as a bit of a fuck you to Express Publications. And that was run by a guy by the name James McRory up at Newcastle. So James used to do the Commodore magazine, and so I was going to do the Ford magazine, and we both send our stuff into a guy called Bob Guntrip, who's kind of the coordinator there in the office, and then he had a designer that he would then work with, and he'd send me the pages, like the InDesign pages over the internet, and I would approve them or make changes and that sort of thing, and we'd create a magazine. Like, we did, 20 odd of these things over, I think we were doing 4 issues a year. So that certainly helped bring some dollars in. And then I was kind of like, I just freelanced for Street Machine the rest of the time. So I was writing a lot of stuff for Street Machine. I was going to shows for them, shooting a lot of show photography stuff. So we're into digital cameras at this stage. So digital cameras have become affordable enough that I could buy a digital camera, and I'd go to a car show or like Spring Nats or somewhere like that, shoot a bunch of cars, write up a story and send it in and get paid for it. I wasn't doing feature shoots as such. I wasn't like Tony Rabeat and Chris Thorogood, as good as those guys. You know, I was just the guy that, you know, could point a camera at a car and take a half decent image, and, you know, they could print it. You know, it was. And we worked freelance for Street Machine for 8 years doing this, you know, like doing the Street Machine Fords, doing Street Machine. They would also, because I didn't have what we call a full-time job, I was just doing this stuff as my full-time job. I was also, you know, I didn't have to worry when they'd say, "Scott, we need you to do the Summernats magazine." So I did the Summernats magazine for years. So every year I'd go to Summernats with them, work with them, and do the Summernats magazine. So the Summernats magazine would take a month after Summernats. So I would go and live in Sydney for a month at my in-laws, and we'd pump out a magazine, then I'd come back home, get paid for it, all that sort of stuff. So it was an interesting time. So 8 years freelancing for Street Machine. And then, you know, YouTube comes along. So YouTube started late 2005. I joined in 2006. I've got all this footage stockpiled because all these shows I've been going to, I've been shooting video as well as taking photos. and it's all to make these car DVDs that I was going to do. And the reason the car DVD thing didn't happen is because Express Publications started putting free DVDs on the cover of their magazine. So you would buy a magazine, you get a free DVD. So they did this for a year or so, or maybe a year and a half, and they saw an immediate spike in their sales. So they thought, this is great, you know, keep pumping out these free DVDs on the cover, and people will buy it, and more people will buy it, and we're going to grow these things. But what they found out, that if they didn't have the DVD on the cover, the sales tanked. Boom, straight through the floor. So they had to keep putting the DVD on the cover, and what they did was they destroyed the DVD market in Australia. So all those DVDs you used to see, like grunt files, high octane, high performance imports, all these DVDs, there was no market for it anymore because people were getting free DVDs on the cover of the magazines they were buying. So why would they pay $30 extra for a DVD? So they destroyed the DVD market, and then they went, you know what, this DVD thing's not working out because we're paying all this money to all these film crew and guys, and the sales are tapering off, so let's sack all the DVD crew. So then they sacked all the DVD crew, but the damage had already been done. They destroyed the DVD market here in Australia. So that's why I never really created my own sort of DVDs, although I did do some smaller volume stuff for like, so the car club I was in, I did a DVD for, you know, a couple of their Donation days, and I did some Mopar Sunday stuff. Did these random things called Mopower Australia. So that was the old website name, but I did a couple of DVDs, you know, with footage from various things that I'd shot over the years that were Chrysler orientated. So, yeah. So my DVD dream was dead, but YouTube comes along, and all of a sudden there's a place to put all this footage. So I start dumping bits and pieces on, you know, there was no money in it, but it was just cool to see some of this stuff on YouTube. And, you know, I got a fair few views on some of this stuff. But there was no money, as I said. And I was going to car shows, and I was still shooting some stuff, and I still had the dream of maybe doing a DVD, but I started noticing this guy, God, I forget his name actually. Modified Car Forums was his business. I've forgotten his name, sorry. And I started running into him at a lot of car shows, and I go, well, dude, he's shooting all this stuff. Where's he going? He's like, oh, I'm YouTube and that. And I'm like, okay, but you're from like up north of Sydney, and you're down here in Victoria. That costs a fortune. How are you making any money out of it? He's like, oh, YouTube gives me money. I'm like, how does that work? It's like, oh, they got this new program. It's a YouTube partnership thing, and you've got to apply and all that sort of thing. There's all these hoops you've got to jump through. It's really hard. But, you know, yeah, I know I make some money through YouTube doing this. I'm like, oh, wow, maybe I should do that. And he laughed. He laughed right in my face. He's like, yeah, nah, it's a bit harder than that. I'm like, okay. Within 2 weeks, I was a YouTube partner. So this is right around the time my son Alex was born, and you know, I've told bits and pieces of that story a bit, but Alex was born, he wasn't breathing when he came out. I'm pretty sure it was cord, like I don't even know the full ins and outs at the time. We were in such a panic at the time. He was not breathing. He came out purple. And yeah, he was in a plane to Royal Children's Hospital within hours. He would have been there like straight away. Like, he was born in Albury, Wodonga, because all the births around the border are done in Wodonga. So he was born in Wodonga, and he would have been in Royal Children's within an hour if the whole place wasn't fogged in. So it was fogged in, and they had to wait for the fog to lift before they could fly him out. And they flew him to Royal Children's, and they're like, there's not enough room on the plane for both of you. One of you can go, but the other has to drive or whatever. And my wife said, well, I'm not making him drive by himself to Melbourne, like just putting Alex on the plane and we will drive to Melbourne. We'd never, like I'd been to Melbourne for, you know, street Commodores and stuff like that, but as a it wasn't a destination we really visited. So we're in the car, we're driving, we don't even know if our son's going to be alive at the other end. So, oh wow, getting a bit emotional there. But anyway, so I'm there in the hospital, Royal Children's, and I'm applying to be a YouTube partner because I know we need extra money. We're going to need extra money because we got this little boy, he's really, really not well. And it turned out the diagnosis was cerebral palsy. So, yeah, I joined YouTube, became a partner, and like I said, 2 weeks. So I started pumping up content and bang, getting views and money starts coming in. And it's not like, you don't get rich off YouTube. Well, there's a few guys that have, let's face it. Cletus has done very well off YouTube. And I think right now he's probably pumping, if he's not making 5 million a year off YouTube alone, I'd be very surprised. But then you've got the merchandise, the sponsorship, all his Freedom Factory stuff. He has his fingers in lots of little pies, and so he's doing very well. And he's obviously got a good staff of people, and I watch all the videos because I love seeing what they do. They do it very well. And but that doesn't happen with everyone, that's for sure. So I got to the point though, the most I ever made off YouTube on Scotty's Garage, I think I did $1,900 in 1 month. I think that was the peak. $1,900 in 1 month, and our mortgage was it was under $1,000 a month because it wasn't expensive to buy a house in Holbrook at that point. So that's why we moved there. You know, we ended up with a small mortgage, a massive house, massive yard, massive shed, and we're midway between Sydney and Melbourne, so I could drive back and forth within. I could be 4.5 hours to Sydney or 4 hours in Melbourne if I needed to be. So, yeah, YouTube saved our asses actually at that point. So it didn't ramp up straight away. It's a process, and it took a while to get rolling. But when we started making $1,000 a month, and that became a quite typical thing. $1,000 a month off YouTube was pretty typical for us at that point. It was really good, and we did that for a whole bunch of years, and then it started to taper off. YouTube changed their algorithm. You'll hear people talk about this a lot on YouTube, the algorithm, and it's a scary thing. They changed it, and our views and traffic died overnight, and I'm like, holy shit. Sorry my language, but oh man, we're in trouble. And also at the same time, Street Machine had pulled the pin on the Ford's mag. It had done alright, but we made the mistake of reusing some old content from Street Machine to save dollars, and people got very angry about it, and so the sales nosedived. It was just a political decision that was made above me, like, you have to start refeaturing some stuff from Street Machine and put it into this Street Machine Fords. I'm like, people have already seen this stuff. The Ford scene isn't that big that you can just reuse this content. And so it really hurt the sales, and eventually it got to the point where they went, we don't think it's worth doing this magazine anymore. I'm like, okay. So lost Street Machine Fords, YouTube's not making enough money anymore. And then Bauer Media comes in and buys ACP. So ACP was Kerry Packer, who's quite a famous Australian. For those from overseas, Kerry Packer was a legend in the Australian media industry. Like, his family, the Packer family, have owned ACP for generations, and Kerry was a force of nature. He was the guy who sat in Australian Parliament and told the Australian government that he was better at spending his money than the Australian government was at spending the taxpayers. So it was every Australian's right and responsibility to pay as little tax as possible, because the Australian government didn't spend it correctly, that's for sure. And he was right. And it was just, he reached legend status in Australia because of that. It was just amazing. So Kerry was I never met him. I won't even pretend that. Like, I did not meet that man. Jeff did, and he told some stories about that, Jeff said. But yeah, Kerry was, he owned ACP. He passed away, unfortunately. James Packer owned it, and James wanted to get into the casino business, so James sold ACP off to a investment group, who then on-sold it a few years later to Bauer Media, who were a German publishing company, had magazine houses all throughout the world, and Bauer Media bought ACP, and then they went, we're going to shuffle things around a little bit, because, you're hearing that they, ACP, especially the magazine business, it took up several floors on several big buildings in the middle of the Sydney CBD, and the rents were just through the roof. Very expensive place to work out of. And they're like, well, we've got this building down in Melbourne, it's bloody empty. Why don't you move all the car magazines down there? That'll save us some money, all the car magazines can work out of Melbourne. So, of course, at that same point, a lot of these guys, like Jeff said, and Craig Parker, who met obviously for the magazine, and a few others, are all great guys who I've worked with over many years. And I knew, as soon as I heard that they were moving the magazines, I said to my wife, there is going to be a job offer here. The offer had not been made, but I said to my wife, there is going to be a job offer here, I guarantee it. Are you happy to move to Melbourne if they call us? And she said, yeah, well, we're there every 6 weeks for Alex, so why wouldn't we? We were going to Melbourne every 6 weeks for Alex checkups and stuff, so we're like, why wouldn't we do that? Moving to Melbourne makes a lot of sense. So I'm like, okay, all right, we'll see what happens. Because I knew Craig was not going to leave Sydney. Jeff was not going to leave. He lived at Gosford and travelled down to Sydney every day. I knew those guys were not going to leave Sydney. I knew the designer was not going to leave. All these guys were hardcore Sydney people, and they were not going to move. So then, Simon rings and goes, Scott, they're moving the magazines to Melbourne. I go, yeah, I heard. He said, would you be willing to move to Melbourne and work for Street Machine full time? And I went, yep. He's like, what? I'm like, yep. You don't have to think about it, dude. Me and Rhonda have already talked about this. How did you talk about this? I'm like, dude, I'm not stupid. I know how these things work. And I knew you need someone. I'm your guy. I'll be there. I'll do it. Me and Simon had already worked together over many years of freelancing, like 8 years of freelancing. And like I said, every year I'm in there in the office helping him out, doing Some Nats Mag. If Simon or Jet Seto went on holidays, and they would go on holidays, every year. Normal people do that. I haven't had a holiday in a long time, but normal people go on holidays and do things. So whenever that happened, Scott got the call. Scott, can you come up and spend 2-3 weeks in Melbourne, in Sydney, and fill in this capacity? And I'm like, sure, I can do this, no problem. So me and Simon had worked together over a lot of years, so we knew we could work together. He knew I knew the content. He knew I knew how magazines worked. And I also knew the internet. Back to the internet. That's right. Full circle again. Because one thing ACP did very badly was the internet. Street Machine never really did a lot on the internet. In fact, I did a video at Summer Nats one year where a car caught on fire on the dyno, and I'd been there and filmed it. And so I said, do you want to put this on the Street Machine website? The Street Machine website was a joke. It was a deal done between ACP and 9MSN, and it was just terrible. But I said, let's put this video on there. You'll get some traffic. It'll be great. So would you believe the people above complained that we were giving too much traffic to this, like the website was crashing. Yeah. The internet is all about traffic. It's all about pushing people to watch stuff. And they were complaining that we sent too much traffic, that the website crashed. So you understand when I say they did websites very badly. But I knew media and website stuff and that sort of thing. This is all stuff they wanted to get amped up for Street Machine. So we all moved to Melbourne. I pack up the family, move to Melbourne. Simon moves to Melbourne. We work out of the Oakley office there in Melbourne. And yeah, that was great. We had some great times there in the Oakley office. It was a very full office at that time. By the time we left the Oakley office, it was very much smaller because, a whole bunch of reasons, but I won't get into that. But yeah, we had some good times, and I got to go to the States 4 years in a row. 4 years in a row. I got to go to the States for Drag Week, to cover Drag Week, and that was fantastic, and I really appreciate that opportunity to do that. We had people going to SEMA every year. I never got to do the SEMA trip, but I got to do Drag Week 4 years in a row, and that was fantastic, and met so many great guys over there, and people I still consider friends. And so, you know, I'm shooting video for Street Machine, I'm writing stories for the magazine, we're doing website stuff, we're doing all that. And then Simon goes, you know what, we need to do our own sort of roadkill type thing. And I said, we can't afford it. He's like, oh yeah, it looks pretty simple. I'm like, dude, roadkill looks pretty simple as a concept. But I guarantee you, every one of those episodes they're shooting is costing them 20 grand. He's like, really? I'm like, everything you see behind the scenes, they're not, you know, David Freiberg is not editing his stuff. He's not working a camera. He's the talent. Same with Mike, and I've met both those guys, and they're really nice guys. Mike Finnegan is a really, really nice guy. David is a little bit more standoffish. Really nice dude once you get to meet him, but you have to meet him a few times before he can even open up and have a conversation with him. He's, interesting guy and been around for a long time, but still, both of them are really nice guys. But yeah, behind those whole roadkill things, if they weren't spending 20 grand an episode, man, I'd eat my hat, because I tell you, they were very professionally done, and YouTube gave them $5 million to create that show. That's right. YouTube did a big push. They wanted to see more, because at this time, YouTube was very much about short form video. So that's videos under 3 minutes. Short form video was where it's at, all right? And you even had companies doing, like, what was that company that was around for a little bit? They used to do 7-second videos, and it was all about the 7-second video. Oh, I can't even remember their name now. They're gone now. Yeah, they got killed by TikTok. But short form video was where it was all at. And then YouTube's like, we need to get people watching YouTube longer. And the only way we can do that is by people creating essentially TV shows on YouTube. How do we convince them that that's a viable thing to do? Well, we're going to pick 20 odd media outlets or whatever and convince them to make YouTube shows. And so that's what happened. They gave Roadkill essentially $5 million is what my belief is what I've heard, and to create Roadkill. And they did 2 seasons of Roadkill on YouTube. But YouTube were dumb in that they did not put a non-compete clause in there. They did not say you have to do this forever. So after their 2 years, what's Roadkill do? They pull it in behind a paywall and create Motor Trend on demand and make their own version of YouTube, but for their own TV shows. And of course they ended up getting bought by Discovery Channel, so it's even worse now. But anyway, I'm segueing away, but yeah, YouTube, long form video, and we've decided we want to get into that marketplace. And I said, dude, if we're going to do this, it's going to cost us, I'm pretty sure, $3 grand an episode to do. And someone's going, well, are you happy to do it? I'm like, I'm happy to take it on, but I want to know that I still have a seat. If and when the music stops, I want to know I still got a seat, because I'm happy to do this. Because at this time too, Express had pretty much closed all their car magazines, and so there's a few people available. Andrew Broadley was one of them, and Simon wanted to bring Andrew in, and to bring Andrew in, Simon needed me to go sideways a little bit, and I was happy to do it. You know, Andrew's a great guy. got Andrew in, and now Andrew is editor of Street Machine magazine, and I'm doing Carnage. But at the time, we had no idea that we were going to get our own workshop or any of that stuff. We didn't have a sponsor. We just went and did it. We didn't even really have permission from the bosses to go do it. We just went and did it. And we created, we started with Turbo Taxi, and we started shooting that stuff. And with friends like Adam at MPW and Bubba, you know, at All Race, they chipped in like some workshop space for us to get started, and they'd help us out where they could. And I really thank those guys for helping us get Carnage started. And then Valvoline came in as a sponsor. Tony, who was their marketing guy, just went, I love roadkill. I love to see this happen in Australia. What do you need? And so Tony signed up for Valvoline to be a sponsor. And then we got Hair and Forbes online, which allowed us to get the workshop as well. So that's how all the Carnage side of things started. So yeah, that's how I got here. And of course, obviously I haven't put up a video on Scotty's Garage for a while, because we did a fundraiser, and I didn't really talk about this before, and I mentioned it during the week for the Patreon guys, and there will be stuff like that on Patreon. So if you sign up, there was going to be behind the scenes stuff that you'll hear that you won't hear anywhere else. But anyway, we did a fundraiser for Alex for a mobility van so he could start going to school, because we were loading him in and out of a station wagon every day and breaking down his chair into multiple components, and it was just, oh my God, it was so hard. It was hard on me, hard on my wife. It was just terrible. And we needed a mobility van for him, but NDIS didn't exist at that time. And also NDIS doesn't buy vehicles. They will help you modify a vehicle, but you got to buy the vehicle in the first place. So we did a fundraiser to get a van that we could load Alex into the back on his wheelchair and get him to school and that sort of thing. And we raised, and people were so good, and we ended up raising 55 grand. I think the van we ended up getting for about 44, and Ewan from, oh God, I've forgotten his business, because his business not around anymore. Ewan's moved to Japan, but Newen did us a deal on the van. I think we paid 40 something for the van. Maybe it was a high 30s, low 40s for the van, and we used the rest of the money to modify the bathroom for Alex's situation, so we could get him into the bathroom in his chair. And so that cost us 12 grand to do. So yeah, so we raised money, and that was all great. But as with anything on YouTube and the internet, there's always going to be a couple of haters, and they were getting comments and messages from people like, oh, you've got, you know, your Valiants, why don't you sell your Valiants and buy the van, you know, why are you asking people for money? And I was like, man, we could have sold everything we had and we could not have bought that van. It's as simple as that, you know. But I really, God, I was angry. I was so angry at the time that I was getting that sort of hate. And I almost deleted Scotty's Garage off YouTube at that point. I'm like, fuck you people, fuck everyone. Sorry about the language, but I was so angry I was going to delete Scotty's Garage, and I just went, just walk away. And I did. I walked away. 5 years, pretty much. I did a couple of videos here and there, but yeah, I walked away from Scotty's Garage for 5 years because I got angry. And I'm not going to let that happen again, because there's been such an outpouring of love from you people, from everyone. We've got 32,000 views on that first video in a week. 32,000 views on the Scotty's Garage's back video. And I mean, I thought if we got 3,000 or 5,000, that would be amazing. That would be fantastic. 32,000 views. I'm just blown away. And then I think, you know, we've got 100 of you guys. Well, 100 have become members on Patreon, and only 80 something. I think it's 80 have actually given money. I don't know why there's free memberships, but it's kind of something that's happened. But anyway, but yeah, I really thank you guys for supporting me, for watching, for coming along on this journey. And this video has ended up a lot longer than I intended. I have no idea what the length is right now, but I'm going to put it all up in one hit, and we'll just let the chips fall where they may. And you guys asked for it, you got it. This is how Scotty got to this point. Scotty's Garage. It has been a hell of a ride, and it's been pretty amazing, and I've met so many people over the years, and I'm sorry I forgot some names through there, but it's been a hell of a journey. But you know, making DVDs, making car magazines, you know, look at them all, you know, it's just been a hell of a journey. And I thank you all for supporting me in just continuing this journey, and hopefully we can do some amazing stuff with Dad's Ute, with the lockdown wagon, with the Trolvo. I've already found a motor for the Trolvo. I'll tell you what that is later, but yeah, I'm pretty sure you'll be happy with what I've chosen, and it's not one of those couple barrows sitting there. It will not be a barrow, guarantee you. I love barrows, but no, I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I think you'll enjoy it. So, like, subscribe, comment, all those things. If you haven't signed up on Patreon, I'd love it if you could. It'd be fantastic. Every little bit helps, and it will help this thing progress, because that's what we need to do. We need to get in a little bit of money so we can spend money on these things, because we can't get everything for free, that's for sure. I have had a couple of people reach out already, sponsor type businesses have reached out and said they're interested in supporting us, so that would be fantastic. I'm not going to talk about that just yet, because I don't want to preempt things, and I don't want to make commitments to things if for whatever reason this all falls in a heap, and I don't think it will. I think you guys have been great, and I think you're supporting me, and I think we're all going to go on an amazing journey. It's going to be fantastic. So if you're interested in one of the Slick Sixpack magazines, let me know if you want one. A, if you want it, and B, if you want it signed. It'll be no difference in price whether you want it signed or not. Work out what I want for them. $20 plus post. Let's say that. I've got 15 of them. $20 plus whatever it costs to post. I will sign it or not sign it, depending on what your opinion is. You know, maybe you don't want me defacing the magazine. But yeah, there's 15 of them. That's all I have to give. So if you want one, I need to work out the process of that. Let me get to that. If I add them to a store or something like that on Patreon, maybe that's the way. I don't think I can do it in the comment section, because I think we'll just get a million comments of people wanting the magazine, and I'm going to lose track of who's who and who's where and that sort of thing. So I think I'll drop it in the Patreon store. You'll have to go there to find it, to buy it, and I think $20 plus post sounds like a good deal to me. So let's do that. Hope you enjoyed the story. Hope you enjoyed the ride. If you want to hear more, we can do it. And but yeah, I guess we'd have to break down into the cars of Scotty's Garage, or the cars of Scotty. I guess the cars of Scotty, there's a story. And then the life of Scotty pre the media career would be another thing, but I don't know. It seems a bit self-serving, doesn't it? I don't know. You let me know. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the story. Hope you enjoyed the ride. I will try and, I hope I've illustrated it enough through various things to keep it interesting, but yeah. And I hope it doesn't sound too terrible straight off the camera instead of through a microphone. So anyway, catch you next time.